So are you warming up to our half-brother now?
I guess so.
Jughead's fate may have just been revealed in the flash forward, so let's break down Riverdale Season 4, Episode 4 and find out just what happened. What's going on, you lovely people? Lisa here, and happy Halloween from me and, well, Riverdale. Now, before I get into this episode, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and notification bell so you never miss any of my TV recaps or celebrity interviews. Now, this week's Riverdale gives us a little more insight into Jughead's future and also includes, of course, the essential Riverdale ridiculousness and the building of some of our villains this season. So let's just dive in. First, we have Cheryl and Tony, and I honestly just can't with this storyline. It just keeps getting more ridiculous as time goes on. I mean, they both deserve so much better because I do like them as characters, but it's like, writers, come on, what are you doing to them? Anyway, as I digress, let's just talk about it. We have Tony now having to put up with JJ's corpse being around, and let's just say three's a crowd, especially when one's a freaking dead body. Now Tony's getting sick of it and she tells Cheryl it's time to say goodbye to JJ. So reluctantly Cheryl agrees to rebury JJ, and when they get finished, a creepy doll happens to show up. Now Cheryl says it's Jason's ghost, or JJ, whatever you want to call him, and that he must be mad at them. Then things just start to get creepier and weirder around the house, and Nana Rose says she heard Cheryl's brother crying in the chapel, and we all assume it's JJ, but in the chapel is that creepy doll. So now Cheryl wants to have a seance to talk to JJ to see why he's upset. Well, they get out the Ouija board, and Nana Rose ends up saying that the person haunting them is not JJ, but Julian, JJ and Cheryl's triplet who Cheryl happened to absorb in the womb. Yeah, so the triplet storyline is coming into play. Now, whether it's real or not, we're gonna have to wait and see. But Nana Rose says that Julian now lives inside the doll who was a part of JJ and Cheryl's lives until they started to get older, and then the doll got put in the attic and he's, well, not happy. Julian is now haunting Thistle House. Now, Tony thinks that Cheryl's behind all of this, just making it up as a way to manipulate Tony into letting JJ come back into the house, and, well, she's partly right. Tony ends up letting Cheryl dig JJ up, and now they're a threesome again. Then Tony finds that doll in her bed and yells at Cheryl because they buried that doll and she thought this whole thing was over, but then Cheryl has to come clean. She admits she did play Tony earlier, but that this doll, putting it on the bed, that was not her, and that the haunting of Thistle House has begun. And I just gotta say, Tony must really have some deep freaking ass love for Cheryl to not have run for the hills right now. Like, I guess now we have this ghost hanging around the house, and in all honesty, can someone just get Cheryl some mental health help? Now, as for Veronica, she's working late at Pop's when a trucker stops by after closing and begs for a home-cooked meal before he goes to see his family, who he's been apart from for a long time. Now, his story seems to warm Veronica's heart, and she agrees to cook him dinner and learns about his family. She then goes to get him some pumpkin pie when she hears the news broadcast on the TV, which apparently I guess he doesn't hear. It's not loud enough, or maybe he does hear it. But she learns that there's a killer patient from Shady Grove who has escaped, and you know what he does? He forces his victims to cook him meals before he kills them. And apparently this guy also killed a truck driver and stole his clothes. So yeah, you put two and two together, it's pretty damn obvious that this guy sitting in Pops is a serial killer. So Veronica ends up having to fight off a serial killer just because it's, well, freaking Halloween. She ends up setting him on fire and knocking him out and leaving him in the speakeasy, and it's kind of like, good job, V, but also you left a burning man down in your speakeasy who could have easily burned down your whole business. We also don't see the cops come for him or what happens to him afterwards, so this guy might not even be dead. He could still be wreaking havoc somewhere. Now, as for Reggie and Kevin, they decide to get into a little mischief because it's Halloween and trick-or-treat, well, you usually sometimes get tricks. And they decide to TP Mr. Honey's office because, well, Mr. Honey is a freaking douchebag. They get caught and Mr. Honey separates them and then basically threatens to ruin their lives of sorts. He tells Kevin he could ruin Kevin's chances of getting into NYU, and then Kevin pleads and begs that he's sorry, and Mr. Honey's like, yeah, okay, fine. That's all I wanted to hear. Then Mr. Honey tells Reggie that he knows about Reggie's father's abuse and that Reggie's not so tough and just hides behind his humor, but that no one will ever take Reggie seriously, and basically makes Reggie feel like crap and then clean his office until the wee hours of the next day. Now, when Mr. Honey and Reggie go outside to go home, Reggie sees that his precious car has been vandalized, and Mr. Honey, of course, blames it on hooligans, but Reggie and all of us know that it was evil Mr. Honey, and Reggie does not look too happy. So will he get his revenge on evil Mr. Honey? Next up are Archie and Monroe, who are trying to keep the kids off the street on Halloween because word is out that Dodger and his gang are going to be causing some trouble because they're still mad about getting beat up by the vigilante, aka Archie with a handkerchief over his mouth. So Archie and Monroe set up a Halloween party at the gym/youth center, and we get a mention of Katie Keene, the upcoming spinoff starring Lucy Hale, as Veronica mentions that her friend Katie in New York can make Archie and Monroe some costumes. They end up throwing this party, and Dodger and his gang show up looking for a kid named Eddie who keeps trying to leave the party in order to, well, go work on the streets for Eddie, but Archie won't let him because Archie wants to keep this kid out of trouble. As Archie and Dodger come face to face, we do see that Dodger recognizes Archie's eyes as a person who beat him up, and you can bet that Dodger's now about to make Archie's life a living hell. Now Dodger and his guys do eventually leave, but then they just decide to sit in the parking lot where they're allowed to. It's not trespassing. Archie then calls FP, but apparently he's too busy and doesn't show up until, well, it's too late, because I guess they had no other freaking cops to send over to this town. Like, this town has the worst security. No wonder there's druggies all over the street. Hiram was able to make a whole jail and drug lord whatever. It's just a mess in Riverdale, man. They need more good people coming in instead of all these bad people. Anyway, Eddie ends up sneaking out, and then they hear gunshots from the parking lot, and it turns out Dodger has shot this kid Eddie in the leg and run. Archie then visits Eddie in the hospital, and Eddie explains that while the youth center will help, it closes at like 10, and then after that the kids still have to make the choice whether to go onto the streets so they can either work for Dodger or they can hide from him. So now Archie tells Veronica he's not sure what to do, but when Veronica says, "Let's clean up the streets," Archie gets this look in his eyes, goes over and looks at his Katie Keene made superhero costume and says, "He'll need a mask." Yeah, I'm sorry, but I almost literally spit my drink out at this point because I'm like, really, please don't tell me that Archie is going to dress up as a freaking superhero or think that he's a superhero and try to take on this whole entire gang. Like, this kid has a heart of gold and he means well, but he seriously has a death wish and like thinks that he is bigger than he is. I mean, granted, I guess if you survived a bunch of gang attacks and a bear attack and all that, you may think you're invincible, but this kid, man, he just needs a break. I think, you know, Fred would have wanted him to help the town, but not put your life in danger. Like, there's got to be better ways to clean up the streets of Riverdale, but leave it to Archie to not find them. Anyway, then we have Betty, who is back living in her old house with FP and Jellybean and Alice, and, well, it seems like Alice and FP are getting steamy, and not that I'm complaining because I like them together, but how is Alice fine after everything she just went through? Sure, it's been a couple of weeks apparently since the whole showdown with Edgar, but you went undercover in a cult. You screwed over your daughter in order to think that you were helping her. Like, you were tied up and tortured, and then you had to kill somebody. Like, there's no way she would recover this fast. I feel like they just like skim over the recovery periods of all of these people. Anyway, Jughead is supposed to come home and hang out with Betty on Halloween and watch movies, and Alice tells Betty that maybe she should invite Charles. You know, but Betty's just confused as to why Charles is still freaking in town, and so am I. Effie then says that Charles is helping him with some cases, but like, don't FBI agents have bigger things to do, more important cases to solve that are coming through than just helping a local cop with some random things? Well, Jughead is a no-show and Betty's on edge because so many people are dressing up as the Gargoyle King and Black Hood for Halloween. She then starts getting mysterious phone calls from a person claiming to be the Black Hood, who says the calls are coming from inside the house. Yes, basically everything we've seen in every horror movie ever. Then conveniently, Charles shows up with pizza and offers to help Betty, saying that he can tap into the phones. Now, when they get another phone call, he tells Betty it's coming from Shady Grove, where Polly happens to be. So they call pretending to be Edgar, and Betty tells off Polly, basically saying, "You're dead to me," even though me and hopefully you as the audience can tell that like this Black Hood voice is obviously different from the other Black Hood, and to me it sounds a lot like Charles or even Brett from Jughead's school. Like, I just feel like it's so obvious, but maybe it's not. But I still feel like it's more so Charles. Anyway, we see Betty and Charles start talking, and Charles starts to open up about how he wants to be part of a real family, but knows it's going to take some time, and he thinks Betty would make a great candidate for a junior FBI training program. It seems like he's not going anywhere anytime soon. He really wants to work together with Betty on stuff, including this videotape case, which we saw set up in the final minutes of the last episode. Now, it turns out all around Riverdale, people are getting these videotapes, and on these tapes, it's just boring-ass footage of their house being watched from across the street, so we don't really know what the purpose of that is, but it puts everybody on edge thinking someone's watching them. Then, the day after Halloween, Betty finally gets to talk to Jughead, which I'm going to talk about next, why he was MIA, and as she's talking to him, she says she thinks Charles might be the real deal, and we see that she's starting to trust him more, and we see that Charles has tapped Betty's phone and is listening and taking notes, and he smiles when she says he's the real deal. It's like, damn it, why can't Betty just get a normal brother? Like, what is this guy's deal now? I bet he's not even a real FBI agent. Or if he is, he should probably get that revoked immediately. Like, he's definitely got to be the one calling Betty, and maybe even the one leaving those videotapes. And is he working with someone else because one of the calls happened while he was helping Betty? Was it on a timer? Does he have machines? What's going on? Could he be related to Brett in some way? They kind of look alike, and by look alike, I mean they just both share blonde hair. I have so many questions, but someone did bring up to me that if Charles is FP and Alice's son, why does it seem like Alice and Betty are like the only ones making an effort to get to know Charles, and Jughead and FP are just like, whatever, you know? But let's move on to Jughead's torturous Halloween night. So in seminar, everyone is sharing their favorite horror writers, and Brett makes fun of Jughead's choice, to which Jughead then returns the favor, making fun of Brett for just bringing in the Raven. Brett then brings up his actual favorite story, which involves a guy getting sealed behind a brick wall to never be seen or heard from again, and it's kind of like, oh crap, the way that he's saying this and that look in his eyes seems like this is something the guy would actually do. So is this foreshadowing to what happens to Jughead in that flash forward? Yeah, I mean, just look at Brett's face, come on now. Then the so-called urban legend of the Stonewall 4 is brought up, and Mr. Chipping explains to Jughead it's just a legend about 4 students over the course of 30 years who happened to disappear from the school and were never heard from again. Well, we know that Jughead likes a good mystery, so he starts trying to do research on this but can't find anything. And he ends up getting drugged by Donna, and then when he wakes up, he's buried alive in a coffin with just a lighter, and it just kind of gives me some anxiety to what I felt when I watched that movie Buried with Ryan Reynolds, when there was like 90 minutes of him buried in a coffin with just a lighter and a cell phone, and it like freaked me out a little bit. But Jughead ends up spending all of Halloween stuck in that little coffin, which is actually in Mr. Chipping's office, until Mr. Chipping walks in and opens it. Now Mr. Chipping tries to pretend that he knew nothing about this, but I kind of don't trust him, and I'm pretty sure he was in on this. But Brett says that this was just Halloween fun, and if it was too much for Jughead, then Jughead could just leave. Like, Mr. Chipping even says this is just part of, the acceptance into this whole thing. Now when Brett says that Jughead could just leave, Jughead is like, yeah, I'm not going anywhere, buddy. We then see Jughead return to his room to find that Moose and all of Moose's things are gone. Now Moose earlier talked about maybe joining the army because he figured his life was over at this high school, but Jughead doesn't seem to think that's the case. He calls Betty and basically thinks that Brett had something to do with it, that they put Jughead in the coffin so that he wouldn't interrupt them getting Moose out. We then hear Jughead tell Betty this.
I think deep down I know that if I ever really went missing that you would be the one to find me.
I would, Jug.
And well, right after that, we flash forward to see Betty and FP in the coroner's office where they're supposed to identify a body, and the coroner pulls back the sheet to reveal Jughead's dead body, and man, do I have even more freaking questions. For one, when does this flash forward even take place? Because I feel like the other flash forwards we've seen have said spring break or whatever it is on there, and this one just was like coroner's office. So like, is this after those other flash forwards? Is this before? Is this actually Jughead's dead body? Because I know if they kill off Jughead, a lot of people are gonna be mad. Is this Jughead faking his death? Does Jughead have a freaking twin somewhere? Is this a fake body? Like, what on earth is happening? Obviously, in that flash forward, we did see Betty, Archie, and Veronica covered in blood, burning their clothes, burning Jughead's beanie. There's theories that, maybe they ended up accidentally killing a student and have to cover it up. Or maybe, like I said, Brett had that look in his eyes like he wanted to put someone behind a brick wall. Maybe they did that to Jughead and that's why he was missing. But we do know that Betty kind of does lead that charge to go find him, which is kind of creepy foreshadowing, right? But I just don't really understand why they got to do Cheryl dirty and why Jughead has to be the one to pretty much almost die every season. I don't know. But that's pretty much the main events of this week's episode. So let's just go ahead and watch the promo for the next one.
Murderers all have one thing in common.
Serial killer genes.
I think this might be getting a little too intense.
I do have the serial killer genes.
Okay, so this whole Betty having a serial killer gene comes back up, and it's like, why? Is that serial killer gene going to be like a Mindhunter thing or something and help Betty help Charles solve serial killer cases? What serial killer are they even looking at? Is that the guy from from Pops that tried to kill Veronica? I don't know. Seems like we're going to unlock maybe some things from Betty, but like, why is Charles so invested in Betty? What is his deal? Is he trying to like take this family for his own too? How long has he actually been watching all of these people? I just feel like there's maybe too many mysteries going on at once here, or too many out there things that my brain's starting to get confused a little bit, but that's all I got for this one, guys. It's your turn to kind of sound off in the comments now. Let me know what you thought of this episode. Do you think that ending scene really means Jughead is dead? Or is it just something to distract us? Is Julian really haunting Thistle House? What is Charles really doing in town? Maybe what storyline you would change if you could. Let me know all your thoughts and theories down in the comments, and after that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss a recap, and check out some of my latest interviews right over here. As always, my name's Lisa. Thanks for letting me ramble, and I'll see you next time.